All right, YouTube. Donald Trump has ended his meeting with the Mexican president, and it was probably the biggest success so far of his campaign, including what he did during the primaries. I do not know whether Trump's adversaries are going to be able to easily recover from this. I look forward and I say at the very least he's going to match Hillary in the debates fairly well. I expect him to at least do slightly better than she does. She's not known for her rhetorical skills up on stage without a fawning, hand-picked audience to dote on her. But as you've seen, several things occurred there that were both interesting and very fortuitous for Donald Trump. First and foremost, there was a conspicuous lack of protesters. A few dozen people essentially at peak, and that was about it. So this sort of begins to denigrate the concept that Trump has pissed off every minority in the world, which, I mean, it wasn't true anyway. And the polling conducted, I think it was by ABC, not exactly the most Trump-friendly outlet, had his support among Hispanics at 26%, approaching the level Romney was at, and it could jump higher as well, so obviously his comments in the past haven't hurt him. He actually managed to hammer out a 5-point agreement as though he was already the sitting president. Now, we've seen moments where Trump acted more like a sitting president than a candidate, both in the primaries and so far in the general. And at each time this happens, his support appears to rapidly grow. His critics appear to be silent for some time. They take a break from bothering to attack him because they know that they can't get away with it easily. We saw this, for instance, with New York values during the primary when Ted Cruz criticized his New York values and he proceeded to deliver sort of a statement on 9/11, and the whole nation was with New York, and New Yorkers were the pride of the nation and stuff. And quickly his opponent shut up, even though he wouldn't apologize. And it seemed more like he was an acting president at the moment that he said these things. Or when he went down to Louisiana in the wake of the disaster there and actually got involved before Obama did. Regardless of what the governor down there says, I think in the wake of the state there threatening to fine or tax the Cajun Navy, as it's called, for doing rescue efforts, I think, of course, people are ignoring what the state of Louisiana's government has said. Of course, right after he won New York during the primaries, what did he do? He switched from giving a victory speech, as most candidates tend to do, and gave a press conference instead. He didn't just sit there and say, oh, well, yeah, what a night, oh, I'm so happy, I'm so proud. And he took a bunch of questions for most of that period, and people noted this is more like he's an acting president. By meeting with a foreign leader and actually hammering out a preliminary plan on immigration and economics with this individual, he just delivered the biggest God almighty blow to the Clinton campaign that I think he possibly could have, because Hillary, of course, refused to meet with the president of Mexico. She can't be bothered. She's too busy siphoning money off of her rich donor friends. So I mean, it's her loss. It's not going to treat her campaign well that she refused to do that. Meanwhile, Trump, who supposedly is hated by the Mexicans, goes down there, speaks of his admiration for legal Mexican immigrants, manages to get the president of Mexico to agree that a wall should be built over the objections of the former president of Mexico, who, of course, has called Trump Hitler and cocksucker and everything else under the sun. And he also stated, and this is something also agreed to, that Mexico's southern border should have a border wall along it, specifically pointing out something that very early on, when Trump began talking about a wall and immigration in general, I stated this: Mexican Americans should not be too concerned about his comments, because the majority of illegal immigrants who have physically crossed the border are not Mexicans. And this is something the alt-right really needs to fucking understand before they cut off their nose to spite their face. Most of them are from Honduras and El Salvador and places in Panama, Venezuela, Colombia, the northern end of South America as well. They ride on trains through Mexico. They illegally immigrate to Mexico. Then they get dumped off by the border because the Mexicans do not have enough border control to keep them out. They're not willing to simply shoot anybody who wanders across the border for that purpose. It's a nightmare for an economy far smaller than ours. So it doesn't work very well. They need a border defense as well, something more cohesive, and they have apparently agreed to that. It's a huge step, because this shows it's not just the problem of the United States or Trump hates immigrants, it's Mexico's problem as well. Updating NAFTA. If ever there was something within this talk, within this loose sort of framework agreement that was hammered out, that would really get Trump's core supporters to turn up at the polls, that would get them to stay on his campaign regardless of whatever else he says about immigration, it's the idea of doing away with or reforming NAFTA to make it more even-handed. Because NAFTA is TPP 1.0, and the TPP is NAFTA 2.0. It has destroyed American manufacturing at the same time that it's given Mexico a significant case of brain drain, because there aren't enough higher-paying jobs in Mexico for people who seek master's degrees, or they get a PhD, or they're a skilled laborer down there. They come here for jobs. And by throttling the immigration process, we have partially caused what Mexican immigrants do come here illegally, although most of them are from Central and parts of South America. We've really caused that ourselves, and NAFTA is at the forefront of causing much of this issue. If NAFTA is successfully reformed, it will cause the American economy to skyrocket with growth. It'll also help the Mexican economy. It's a case where a so-called free trade deal, prior to the TPP was instituted, that does not help any of the member states. It doesn't. It holds all of their economies back. The idea of keeping wealth and manufacturing in this hemisphere, as in the Americas. Trump has just echoed the Monroe Doctrine. And if anybody at this point is going to call him bigoted for suggesting that the American hemisphere should be solidified, should be steeled against the outside world, should all be prosperous, should all be free, and should all be free of the sort of constraints and economic meddling that we find in Europe or parts of Asia, if anybody continues to call him a bigot, after standing there in Mexico with the Mexican president to hammer out that type of agreement, then they are simply deluding themselves. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's a great idea. I've talked about this before years ago myself. The United States should focus on the Americas, because at the very least, if the rest of the world goes to hell, things here can be, we can batten down the hatches. We don't have the kinds of problems that you have also, as well, in other parts of the world. Population density in Europe and Asia, the other Western Europe and East Asia, the other two major industrial centers in the world, other than the United States, into parts of Canada and Mexico, really. Those areas are densely populated. They are reliant upon pumping their own populations, or they dole money out to people like Denmark does now to get them to breed more, to be at replacement rate or whatever. They have issues with the fact that they can no longer grow in a quantitative sense. Qualitatively, as far as technology, yeah, they're on par with us. But as far as packing more people in, there comes a point at which that no longer significantly adds to your economy. The Americas, by comparison, are wide open, free, empty spaces that could double in population as a total comfortably, and there would still be plenty of greenery left. Therefore, this plan makes complete sense. We should follow the Pax Americana style model for the next century. Let the rest of the world go to hell. It was never the intent of the Founding Fathers that we should meddle around in Europe, or meddle around in Asia or Africa. They wanted to keep to this free, democratic hemisphere. It's a good idea, and I think that Clinton fans are going to struggle to find really any fault with at least this part of his plan. Stronger border control, as the second point of his plan, extends beyond just the United States. He's talking about the Mexican southern border as well. Having a border wall there, oddly, would be more effective than having a border wall on our southern border. It's a much smaller area, and that's where most of the illegal immigrants are crossing in. Ending illegal immigration through not just the wall but other efforts, I would say fundamentally a good idea. I believe that we should stop throttling legal immigration, and we should keep out illegal immigrants. There's no reason to admit them. No, I don't think it's a humanitarian thing to do. I don't think it has anything to do with ethics. I think that it has to do with culture and economics. Now, I feel sorry for these people, and I would point out, of course, if you end the drug war and you tear up NAFTA for one thing, and reform NAFTA for another, then these countries wouldn't be so impoverished. They wouldn't have such problems. The idea of simply, oh, well, we'll admit all these poor people that are like they're starving or oppressed, that's a great idea, but why are they starving and oppressed in the first place? Nobody wants to address the core of the disease. They're simply trying to treat the symptoms. It's not ethical to simply bring in wave after wave of immigrants, destroying potentially parts of our economy in the process, while the reason that they're coming here in the first place is because of our government's failed policies, especially in Central America with trading there. We've turned them into banana republics through NAFTA. We've turned them into little more than banana farms and cotton and tobacco plantations. That's the problem. This is also Venezuela's problem. They've got a monocultural economy. They are reliant. That's the problem. It has nothing to do with anything Trump did. It doesn't have to do with evil racists or a border wall. It has to do with our own government's stupidity when it comes to so-called free trade deals. Ending the cartels. Excellent. The U.S. should have long ago partnered directly with Mexico to wipe them out. I will point out that unless you end the drug war, it will not be fully successful. You can dumb them down. You can decrease their numbers. You can prevent them from conducting so much violence. But until you end the drug war, or at the very least scale it back to reallocate resources, especially in conjunction with these two border walls that would be built, until you do that, the problem will not be fully cleared up. Now, Trump has alluded to being for medical marijuana. He softballed when asked about legal weed for recreational consumption. It is my belief that the reason that he softballed his answer and didn't quite want to say what he would do is because he's for recreational marijuana and sees it as a tax opportunity. More power to him. I think he didn't want to mention that because it was still the primaries, and he realized, oh, some of these states will not vote for me if I make it clear to the Republican Party, yeah, I don't care if you smoke marijuana. That's why. That's just like abortion or gay marriage. He doesn't care about these issues. He can pretend that he does. His critics can pretend that he does. He didn't. He said those things to delude the Republicans in the country, the partisans that had to nominate him. But now he's in the general election. Hopefully he'll be more forthcoming about these issues. We have just seen Trump not only act presidential, but function as a sitting president. It goes well beyond just image in this case. They actually sat down, called each other friends, came to a joint economic agreement in a single afternoon. Does this happen regularly in D.C.? No, it doesn't. It does not happen often. When it does, it's astonishing to people. This may give us an indicator of the speed with which he's capable of hammering out agreements with people. If this is how a Trump presidency would operate, my goodness, he could golf 300 days a year and still get just as much accomplished as W or Obama have. Now, this is not a glowing endorsement of Trump. I'm simply pointing out. From an unbiased perspective, there's no criticism really that can be lodged at what Trump did. He took a great risk going down to Mexico. He could have been shafted. He could have been, not met on the tarmac. Maybe he shows up there and nobody's there to meet with him and it's all just an attempt to troll him by the whole nation of Mexico. He shows up and nothing gets accomplished and the Mexican president, bad talks him when he leaves or something like that. But it seems like it was an extremely friendly meeting. It seems like they came to essentially a pretty damn good agreement, and one that benefits the United States and the entire hemisphere. The U.S. and Mexico benefit, and the entire hemisphere benefits. Get rid of CAFTA, reform NAFTA, or get rid of it. I think that would probably be even better. But reforming it is possible. If it's simply gutted and then reworded, then you could make it so that American manufacturing comes back, higher-paying Mexican jobs come back. You don't have sort of this master and servant relationship in which people who aren't part of that master class in the U.S. and people who aren't part of the brute labor class in Mexico keep suffering. Because that's what NAFTA really, right now, does. It really screws the lower and middle class in the United States, and it certainly screws the skilled and educated in Mexico. who really are the future of that country. Well, we've got people that are educated right here, and they've got plenty of brute labor workers in Mexico. Both of these economies would potentially flourish with less social alienation, less social and economic stress, if simply the people were to stay on either side of the border where they were born more often. There will always be immigrants to the United States, and what Trump again has made clear, he is not against immigrants. He's against immigrants that come to this country illegally and then proceed to commit felonies. Now, he said, yeah, we're going to deport the felons, which, who's against that? Who? Is Clinton against that? She wants to keep a bunch of felons in the country? I don't think the average Democrat really cares about the issue. What they're looking out for is, what about families that are here? Someone's got a wife, they got kids, they got a husband or something. They've already... they're skilled, they just happen to not file their paperwork properly, they've done nothing wrong, they've been here for 20 years. What he's saying, essentially, it seems, is that those people will have the ability to become citizens, but it's not going to be an immediate pathway. They have to pay back taxes, they have to go through some sort of process, they do have to be screened. And I fail to see anything wrong with that. I know that the libertarian ethos under people like Johnson is, oh, throw open the borders. I don't agree with that. I just don't. I can't bring myself to believe that it's a good idea for a society that wants to be free to invite just any person who happens to want to come into the country. I happen to agree with the ethos of give them a background check, give them a health screening, and then you shouldn't be throttling legal immigration. But at the same time, you do have to safeguard your culture. We see what happens in countries where that doesn't occur. It's called colonialism. That's the problem. I don't think that Gary Johnson fully understands that. It's one thing that I would spar with many libertarians on. More of them are open borders libertarians, really, than myself. I'm in the minority within the libertarian movement for not wanting completely open borders. I think people should be able to be tourists wherever the hell they want. And if they're skilled and they want to seek work in another country, it shouldn't be an overly burdensome process. But to simply say, yeah, without any guarantee that you're going to actually seek employment or do what an average person would do, yeah, come across and stay as long as you want, I just don't think that's a good idea. So Trump has knocked it out of the park. This is probably the most important moment in his campaign so far. I would not be surprised if he takes the lead over Clinton as the result of this, because it goes a long way towards erasing the fear that some Republicans had that he was going to go down there and make a fool of himself. It shows that he can be presidential in a foreign land. That's point number one. Point number two, he got more accomplished in a few hours than, somebody like Bush or Obama apparently can in a month. So that shows his effectiveness. I think that goes a long way towards alleviating their fears. For the independents, and especially within the Rust Belt, reforming NAFTA is going to be a big one. And as far as wiping out the cartels and being simply friendly with the Mexican president, saying, yeah, I do appreciate legal immigrants from Mexico. They're hardworking, they're good people. Can you say a draw for independence? And this comes on the heels, of course, and I'll be making a video about this as well, of Hillary Clinton's unfavorability after her Reno speech. I correctly predicted this as well. Her favorability tanked, especially among women and liberals. Because during her Reno speech, she praised George W., she praised Ronald Reagan, she praised Harry Truman. Not going to help her appear to be a leftist. It's just not helpful. And then the gutter politics, really, they don't work with female voters as well as they may with certain parts of the male voting population. They want to hear issues. They're concerned about a family, they're concerned about a career, or something like that. They don't want to see Clinton sit up there for almost half an hour and just say nothing other than, yeah, internet trolls, yeah, alt-right, ooh, spooky Nazis and stuff. Her Reno speech is probably the low point of her campaign, and what Trump just did might be the highest point of his campaign. I believe he'll add support. He will draw even with, or possibly supplant Clinton at this point. Going into the debates, it gives him a much, much better position of leverage. And if he does halfway decent at the first debate, then I'll be prepared to predict that unless something catastrophic happens at one of the other debates, or he drops dead or something, that he's probably won the election. I think this will especially be prevalent in swinging numbers in the Rust Belt, specifically because of any mention of NAFTA, which I'm sure Later on, he'll speak about it at his immigration speech for the next weeks. He'll talk about little else other than this at his rallies. He'll probably go to Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, that area of the country, down into the Carolinas, maybe Georgia, because briefly that looked like it was in play. I don't expect it to be in play by November, by the way. He'll probably take it down to Florida as well, with a Hispanic minority there that's quite powerful, even though many of them are Cuban. I think that he may have just set himself up to win the election in a single afternoon. Imagine that. The last time we had a candidate hit their opponent this hard and make them look that weak, while at the same time making themselves look very, very strong without directly attacking their opponent, it was in the 1980s, and Ronald Reagan was debating Walter Mondale. That's about all. Peace out.